Brooklyn, New York, the ancestral homeland of the Lenape people. And I would like to welcome Makeda Gershenson, who is a member of our team here at Resilience and as part of the Resilience family, to lead us in a land acknowledgement before we begin.
Morning, my name is Makeda Gershenson, and yes, thank you, Nora and Christy, and everyone for being here. So I wanted to begin by acknowledging the land that I am also calling in from, and acknowledging the land it's a process and a practice of deliberately naming that this is Indigenous land. Indigenous people have rights to this land, and each acknowledgement of the past helps us redefine our values in this moment, which can help guide our conversations and our solutions as we think about the future. And so it is part of our responsibility to consider what it means to acknowledge the history and the legacy of colonialism. And so I'll acknowledge the land of the Lenape and Canarsie First Nations people, the land that I'm learning and working from. And I encourage you to learn more about where you are now and where you've been. And as we move into this conversation today, maybe take a moment to consider what healing your ancestors might need. As we're all working through intergenerational trauma, those whose ancestors have been harmed and are healing, and also those whose ancestors have caused or been complicit in harm. And so there are lots of complex layers to explore and systems to dismantle and seasons of grief to hold space for. So every time that we acknowledge, every time that we name, we call into this space and see and think and bring to mind the lives of those whose voices have not been heard. It is an opportunity to gain clarity about why we need to think critically about our relationship, not only with each other, but also with our earth, with ourselves, with our mindsets, and our relationships to our hearts. That supports us in courageous conversation. So last week we took 8 minutes, 46 seconds to call the names of those whose lives were lost to police brutality. And today I want to call the names of Dominique Fells and Rhea Milton, two Black trans women that were killed just this past week. So I wanted to pause, offering a moment of silence for them, their families. And as we continue into our conversation towards this J.E.D.I mindset, these new practices to consider unconditional positive regard for another human's inherent dignity and worth that hopefully can lead our conversation. So thank you.
That was so beautiful. Thank you so much, Makeda, for grounding us with such beautiful intention. And with that, we will begin today by giving you a very brief introduction about what Resilience 2032 is for those that are new and joining us today. Do you hear the background chants? No? A little bit? Yes, so there's a protest happening right around the corner, and I got goosebumps as you were, I still do, as you were leading us with this land acknowledgement today, Makeda. It is definitely a momentous time. And so I'm grateful for all of you for joining us today for our conversation, and really honored to have the panelists with us today. So Christy, I'm gonna hand it over to you to give us a little, to introduce our audience to Resilience.
Sure, thanks. Thank you everyone for joining us today for our conversation on the future of J.E.D.I, which stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So Resilience is a social media theater experience, which is a new format of experiential entertainment that we as a team are pioneering. And it will unfold in real time from this August through this October across multiple social media platforms And the story is driven by user-generated content, which means you guys get to be an active part in it and share your voice and shape the way that the story unfolds. The story that we're telling is set in the year 2032, which is 12 years from now. And the year 2032 is also 2 years after the UN's Sustainable Development Goals are set to be due, and on the brink of another US presidential election. We're asking and inviting you guys to step into the future with us as an exercise to sort of imagine the scope of possibility of what the future could hold, and more closely examine the issues that are relevant to our present that will shape our future, namely climate change, our data-driven ecosystem and all of the ethics that go around data and technology, and systemic inequality. So that is what this story is about, and that is why we host these conversations, is to invite thought leaders from all different areas to share with us their expertise and perspective on what our future might hold.
Yes, perfect. And we will be going live with our social media theater experience this August, from August to October. And there are a few members of the Resilience team on today, which I'm sure you'll get to hear from them during the conversation. So our guest panelist today is Jason Council. Jason has spent 20 years working to strengthen the nonprofit sector, and he has held senior leadership roles at Phillips Education Partners, Horizon New York, the Post Foundation. Was that the correct pronunciation, Jason? No. Thank you.
Foundation.
And the New Jersey Advocates for Education, as well as the Robinson Harris Foundation, just to name a few. He currently operates an independent consulting practice, and he's also an associate instructor at Columbia University in the Master's Nonprofit Management Program, where we both are AIs together, and we're also in grad school together. And I'm so grateful that that program brought Jason into my life. And we're very grateful you're with us today. He is an active advocate of social justice and education reform. And yes, welcome, Jason. Sharice and Makita, who are from Team Resilience, are also going to be contributing to our conversation. So I'm going to briefly introduce them as well. Sharice Myers, who was with us last week as a panelist, is a marketing professional focusing on multicultural marketing, and she's worked in the entertainment industry, ensuring that the content created is reaching diversified audiences, from Showtime to Amazon to Netflix, just to name a few. And Makita Gershenson is an educator and an artist and the founder of Good, Better, Best, who led our land acknowledgement and leads our land acknowledgements. And her areas of expertise include social emotional learning and emotional intelligence. She is a graduate of Stanford University, both her undergrad and her master's. So thank you so much. Jason, I want to start us off with this conversation. This is a question that we ask all of our panelists at the beginning. In light of the rapid changes that are happening in the midst of this pandemic and in the midst of a racism pandemic, what do you see clearly now that you couldn't see 3 months ago?
Well, first, thank you for having me. Big shout out to the work you are doing, resilience and the disruptivist movements. You are utilizing your platform. I was able to participate as a spectator last week, and it was very impactful and stayed with me the entire week. So I'm really honored to be here this week. So shout out to everyone who participated last week in presence and in spirit. So for me, when I hear the word clearly and now, I think of several things, right? I think of a couple of different points. The first one would be mortality, right? What mortality looks like. I've never vividly seen a black cloud like I've seen over the past 3 months. For me, as someone who is a person of faith and someone who wakes up every morning and intentionally gives praise to the Most High and to the Creator, it's been interesting the past 3 months to actually wake up and open my eyes and just kind of look around, take a quick inventory and say, yes, like you made it one more day. And I've never had to deal with that, right? Between police brutality and murder by law enforcement isn't something new to me, but compounded with the COVID-19 and the fear tactics that came with that, and the magnifying glass that was put on disparity that we may not have even been as privy to, some of us, it was alarming. It was really alarming. A couple other things that come to me is the power of reset, and just how powerful it is to just reset. And sometimes you're resetting a room you were just in and you're fixing it back to the way it was. Sometimes you're resetting a relationship to identify healthy boundaries. In this case, the reset is global, it's massive, and you can't deny it. So resets have a front end and a back end. So from a futurist standpoint, I'm really excited to see what the back end of our current reset looks like, universally and locally. I think about urgency, and the time was then, right? I think we have many people who are familiar with the African proverb, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. I think about what urgency looks like and how the time was yesterday. And if you are not inspired or moving with a sense of urgency, you are missing a critical moment in your life personally, let alone those around you. And then I think lastly, I think about what opportunity looks like. I've never seen, again, in my personal life, an opportunity where Black thought and Black thinkers are coveted in this manner. Maybe it is a tactic, maybe there is some inauthenticity to it, but maybe there's some shreds of opportunity there. So for us as people who took the step to be part of this conversation today, those who are interested in what the future of justice looks like, and equity and diversity and inclusion, there's a big opportunity right now. And I would encourage everyone to become an opportunist. I think there's always a negative stigma attached to that, and I don't think that's the case. Now is an opportunity for you all to just be unapologetic in your pursuits for all the current matters that are taking place.
Yes. As you were sharing, I was also thinking that you are also a father of two boys.
I am. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then there's that, right? So I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old who are they're dynamic and they get it, right? They really get it. And almost too much. It's almost frightening because the way they get it, especially my 8-year-old. I mean, he calls it like it is. I mean, and he's been very clear in establishing what he sees. But for them, as they like to spend time with mom and dad, and this may not be the healthiest, but we are watching a lot of news outlets right now, and part of it is to start the conversation, right? I have yet to sit down and tell my sons about the Black Panther Party, but through QED programming and what we've been watching, they did a phenomenal documentary. And it was like such an opportunity to talk about what the Black Panther Party represented. And then they followed it up with I Am Not Your Negro from James Baldwin. So it was like, hey, here's an introduction to James Baldwin as well. So I do want to shout out some of the media for what's happening right now, because from a programming and content standpoint, I mean, for those who've already been at the party, we're a little excited to see some of these things highlighted. I do have to say, as much anti-racism material and content I would like to see, it's very important that we don't just glean over the excellence and that joy that we as a culture have created and made of when we weren't necessarily given the best opportunity. So it's just been really amazing to see them active and participate. I took them on a march last Sunday, and I mean, I can't even put it into words. It's like when you think about those things you wish you would have done with your parents or your mom or your dad. It's like, wow, if you went to a protest, I mean, some of you were probably fortunate enough to go to a protest or have parents who were active advocates, but if you weren't, such a joy to take them out there and to see who's leading it. It wasn't me. It were people, it was their peers, right? Even though they're 10, their peers were out there just as strong, if not stronger than my peers. So for them to see that you don't just have to have a back seat in this, was amazing.
Yes. Charisse or Makita, do you have any comments? Because I saw you like nodding a lot of the times and read some reactions on your faces. So I'm curious if you have any comments.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking about how this moment has the idea of, you know, being an opportunist in this moment. I think about what from like a media perspective, what people have been doing, and or what corporations and different companies and studios and all that kind of stuff have been doing in this moment, and how that sector needs to be changed as well. But so seeing the stepping up of places like Netflix and completely changing their front page of their platform to specifically feature Black works is incredible. Seeing seeing them like tangibly shift something is really amazing. Seeing things online, different campaigns like hashtag share the mic now, where you saw 25 different notable white women change, like give over their platform to a Black woman who is of a similar space as them, and have them take over their platform for a full day and then continuing those conversations was incredible. Like I would have never imagined, you know, seeing Kourtney Kardashian's platform being completely taken over by Bozoma St. John, or seeing there's so many different people who are participants in that campaign. I absolutely love that. So I'm seeing these like these moments in which people are really starting to take stock in this, and it almost is a detriment to people to not pay attention right now because their audiences are, and people are getting really tired of celebrity culture in these moments where we're all suffering, we're all in a really deep struggle, but it's even more apparent if you do not have millions and millions of dollars. And so people seeing celebrities complain about a lot of the, you know, the lack of normal and stuff was grating on the skin for a while. And so it almost, people are putting, you know, pressure on, where they're putting more pressure on these corporations, on these influencers, on everyone to step up and say something and do something, and not just, you know, talk about whatever product they have and what their latest project is. They're like, what are you tangibly doing? How are you making a change? How are you shifting? And how are you stepping up in these moments? Because that is what's necessary. And so I think that's going to um, have ripple effects far beyond this year, because this year is a big, like Jason said, this is a big reset year. And so we're going to see the ripple effects of 2020 for a long time, which is to me really beneficial. I think this is going to be a really good thing to see how, yes, who put, Marley put in the chat, the how Band-Aid is also adding in like different skin tones into their branding, which people don't understand how much, like, what it's like to grow up and not even have like Band-Aids that would even slightly mesh into your skin to not show that you have an injury. Like, what? Like, that is mind-boggling that it's taken that long for Band-Aids to, you know, switch colors. There's a lot of Black-owned companies that have just done it instead, because the one that we all know just never has. So we're seeing a lot of, like, in moments like that, we're seeing a lot of these different companies and corporations take stock of what's going on and note it and move forward and shift. And so it took a lot to get here. It took a lot to get here, but I'm like, whatever it takes for people to get on the wagon and push it and move it forward, so be it. Everyone is, they cannot afford to look away now. People cannot afford to look away. We're all at home. We're all stuck. We're still around the world, still in the midst of a pandemic. So there's nothing to distract people from what is happening here and now. And it's just going to continue for a while. So I'm glad.
I would just add something. I'm sorry, Makita. Makita, please go ahead.
Well, I have a few thoughts. So, so I was thinking when you mentioned like a call to action to be opportunist, I was noticing in my body the constriction, and pausing for a moment to sit with my internalized depression about how I've been conditioned over my entire life and all the messaging from my significant adults in my life that I'm to be seen and not heard as a child. So there's the adultism piece. So I'm excited that you took your children to the protest to voice their voice for it to be heard. And just kind of acknowledging that there's work for everyone. I think I mentioned it earlier, there's work for everyone to kind of do to see how we are upholding these white supremacist characteristics in our culture. And I think of it as a muscle. I think of like emotional intelligence, emotional fitness, that these are new, I think of like a giraffe, like a baby giraffe kind of trying to walk around. And that's what I kind of assume when people coming into spaces and talking about race, is that people are just like bumbling around. And to speak to the shift in media, there was all of that, like post the black image, post the black box, don't post the black box, do this, don't do this. And this like cycle of shame and like, oh, do I speak, do I not speak? And I was just thinking, as a person of, as a Black woman, to go through my Instagram and to see myself reflected, I didn't even know the healing that was present in that. I didn't even like, there was a moment where I was like, ooh, like this is for me. And in thinking about my lens as an educator, and part of the reason that I had difficulty in the classroom, like I knew there was something that was missing when it was like, the transatlantic slave trade brought workers over to work on the feet. Wait a second, I feel like there was something missing. And I feel that this moment in time, like this is history books in the making, what's happening right now. And so my work with educators, I'm so excited to be asking students what they're noticing, and letting the conversation start from what they're noticing, and supporting them and thinking about their own identity, their relationship to their own identity. And it's just like this inverse. It's this inverse, and I think as an artist, so I'm a belly dancer, and we decided to put on a Black belly dance show, and the response to it, and specifically for young girls, a few gentlemen as well, that watched the show and were like, I can see myself reflected. Like, this is an empowering image of myself. This is not sexualized. This is excellence. This is technique. This is years of training. I'm feeling, I'm a relentless optimist, but the media shift, the opportunity, hopefully for people that are not seeing themselves reflected for this week, hopefully that feeling of FOMO, or the fear of missing out, or like I'm not included, like hopefully people can bring that into their headspace and just consider that that's the inverse, right? Like if you're like, oh, I'm not being seen this week, I haven't been seen I feel like I haven't been seen my entire life, or I feel like my voice has been needed to be disclaimed, or like, oh, I'm the diversity in a room, so I'm the voice for a group of people. So I love that idea of the reset, because I think that this is an opportunity that will, woof. Yeah. I know our ancestors are like, do it. / they're probably like, you all are sitting in the same room. Okay, like they're probably having to do their own unpacking. So I'm glad that we're able to hold this space.
Their mind is definitely blown, that's for sure, right? When you think about some of the things that you all just said, and if you were to look at last week, what do you think was the hottest job on the market last week and current day, right? Head of diversity, head of inclusion, head of equity, head of equality, right? I would challenge these corporations to find a chief conscience officer, right? To find someone who's really going to audit the equality and diversity and inclusion initiatives. I was having a conversation with someone a couple of days ago, and I was talking about someone a little outside of the loop a little bit. So I was breaking down the Black experience. I was comparing it to karate, right? So in karate, right, when you go to the dojo, you don't, there's spectrums of karate, right? There's black belts, there's different belts. You had to earn your belt to go to the next round. And I started to say, some people who are coming into the dojo, we welcome you into the dojo. We're so excited you're in the dojo. There are some black belts in the dojo, there were some green belts, but you made the decision to come in where before people weren't coming into that dojo. People didn't want to come in and get hit. And now they want to come in, they want to get hit, they want to spar, they want to put on the uniform, they want to learn the language. And that is awesome, right? I mean, so I almost at times have to pull myself down from a soapbox of where were you? It's always been here and it's always been wonderful. And this should have been represented. To Makita's point, that representation you saw the past week, it's like, where was that, right? I remember last week we discussed, well, you all discussed our biggest export, right? Culture. We talked about the biggest export that we have. And when we think about American culture, it's Black culture, right? I mean, just being real, what's transcending outside, that's like everything cool and the trade Brooklyn that we heard from the people in France. I mean, it's just, it's just really interesting to see that becoming magnified. And of course, everyone here wants to see, again, the other side of the reset. What's the sustainability look like, right? How is that going to translate for the long term? How can we change this from a moment, from not a moment to a movement, without using what's trending right now, but how can this moment, Makita said, you're an undergrad, I was a history major. I used to teach a little bit of history, right? And for me, as I got older, it was all about being on the right side of it, understanding you're currently in history and being on the right side of it. Right now, and this is why I use the term intentionally opportunistic, you have to be opportunistic in where your personal space in history is going to be right now. Now, that can sound selfish, but it's very selfless because your personal space is indicative of those around you and those around them and those around them. So it's important that you lean into this from a place of, I'm going for it. I'm going to ask the questions, I'm going to have the conversations, and it's going to stay with me. It's funny, I think about a client that I worked with. I'll keep them anonymous for now. They're high profile. I worked with them. It's a group of athletes. And I worked with them when I launched my practice last summer. This was one of the first groups that I consulted with. Was stoked to work with them, right? Because they represented something that I had grown up looking at and enjoying. And they were called to do the work. And they tried, but they weren't able to organize, and there was just things that weren't working, right? And I came into the room as a consultant and I gave my ideas. And I gave my ideas to a room that predominantly looked like me, male presenting Black, right? And it was met with this, whoa. And these were the disruptivists, right? It was met with this, and now when you fast forward a year later, this group has again been highlighted for the work that they're doing or should be doing. And it's like some of those things that we discussed last year that were brazen are now in vogue, right? If I were to have that same meeting with them right now, it's like, holy shit, you're on trend. This guy gets it. But last year it was like, get him out of here. Like we can't wear a ski mask and cover our face to show that we're nameless, faceless warriors that are all part of something that's taking place. Where now it's like, I would probably be like the hotness, right? It's like you would be. So it's just funny watching that. So I want people who have been in the dojo, been at the party, who have been doing the work to be excited about doing your work 2.0 right now, Because right now, that friend you spoke to 3 months ago may have a completely new disposition, right? That job you applied for that you weren't necessarily qualified for 3 weeks ago, you're hot right now. Go get it.
Yes. Um, I love that. I pulled up a quote by Angela Davis that speaks to this. I have a hard time accepting diversity as a synonym for justice. Diversity is a corporate strategy, and diversity without structural transformation simply brings those who were previously excluded into a system as racist, misogynist as it was before. And back to your point about chief conscious officer in the future, I think that organizations should have chief conscious officers. Jason, maybe we can include that into our story world. Fun fact, also in our story world, Juneteenth is an official US holiday, and Election Day is, Columbus Day no longer exists. An election, it has now been replaced with Election Day, which is when which is will unfold this October, obviously, as we mentioned earlier, but just wanted to plug that.
Awesome.
And to talk about the future, I want to get your thoughts about some of the things that you fear. Like, you talk about how this moment is monumental and how things right now, in terms of like even applying for jobs, like we are seeing that change, and that action and reaction like manifest that way. But I wonder, like, what are some things that you fear could be part of our future, everyday lives, specifically in the year 2032, 12 years from now? And yeah, let me stop there.
I mean, I fear a lot, right? I mean, because everything that we just discussed for the past 39 minutes, if it were to be for naught, right? I do understand that impact can be incremental. And for many, 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 many years, hundreds of years, we've had this incremental impact, but we're ready for more, right? And I do not want this moment to be satisfied with the incremental impact. I'll accept it. I don't want it. I fear it, right? I fear that our young folks who are leading the charge are going to become discouraged or disheartened, based on gatekeepers not getting out the way and allowing for change to take place. I fear a bigger divide and a bigger disconnect, right? I feel like, some of the things that we've witnessed recently with the changing of wealth and all those things and what that looks like. I just fear a bigger divide and a bigger disconnect and a bigger mountain to climb for the conversations we're having now. I mean, these conversations are timeless, right? And I say they're timeless because they've been going on for so long and they have the potential to continue to go on. And I fear that they have to go on in this capacity. I fear the same old, back to business as usual. But here's what, not to live in fear, right? Because I'm a strength-based person. So fear, those are my fears, but a couple of things that I really hope for to happen between now and then would be what I'm calling the new great migration. And it's not geographical, right? It's migrating into the space. What's the space? Whatever the space is, right? It's the new great migration where we are infiltrating every single school, business, community organization, just every single area of making sure that we are setting our future generations up for success, that we are migrating to those places, that we're pulling people with us to go into these spaces. And we're just like, again, looking for these opportunities and taking advantage of these opportunities. I want it to be where the presence of a chief conscience officer and the presence of a actual diverse global leadership team, not like exactly what Angela Davis is talking about, is the norm, right? It's the rule, not the exception. There's no longer you walking into space and see someone that looks like you and you're just like, ah, so excited to see you here, right? But at the same point, at the same token, if I want to use that word, but at the same point, it's like, but you have to be happy that that person is there, right? Like, you know, not it. I always struggle with being a straddler, right? When I would take those Myers-Briggs tests, I was always right in the middle. I was always a hub. I'm a hub. I don't know if it's because I'm over empathetic or just temperamental. I don't know what it is. But when I think about seeing us in those spaces, I get upset because there's not a lot of us. But then I have to be excited that at least there was one when there was none. And it's like we have to figure out what the heck is our new normal, which I hate, right? Because what's our new normal? And I hope that the new normal becomes, these conversations become a little dated, right? Like these groundbreaking conversations just become casual conversations. And it's just, it's not, the stakes aren't as high, right?
Yes. We like to say at Resilience that we're living the future now,
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
future is here, especially in this moment. Like we have the choice, we now have more agency than we've ever had before to shape culture,
Yes.
and terminology, which we talked about a lot last week in ways that I don't think we had before this moment. Um, Makita or Sharice, I also want to invite everyone to please continue to put your thoughts in the chat and ask your questions. And if we would love to also hear from you, so there is a raise your hand function, or if you just wave, I will see you, and would love to hear um, uh, from you. Makita and Sharice, any thoughts before we move on to the next question?
The question was about specifically what we fear possibly being in 2020, 2032, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I think that one of the things I'm most worried about is that straight things not structurally changing, and specifically when it relates to the corporate world, I think about a lot, especially because what Jason has said before, there's a lot of diversity and everything is really hot right now because everybody's talking about it. Things are really like this is necessary. Even the last conversation we had, uh, my boss was on the call, and that caused a new discussion, um, and then that led to eventually getting to the executive team and what that looks like. And even in my old job, people are like, I talk to old coworkers and they're like, oh, there's a lot of stuff people are shifting and changing. And in entertainment, they're like really trying to press us at like trying to get more diversity involved, like in every little part of the marketing structure, which is great, unless the top stays the same. If you try to get a new, more diverse, maybe even workforce, or trying to have like on the lower levels, having more diversity, or maybe even having a diversity team or whatever. But if you're looking at the same white faces at the top, if you're looking at the same exact structures that are in place and nothing being changed in that way, if HR is the same, if there's no differences in hiring practices, if none of that is the same, if all of that stays the same, then what is this for? I think it's more than just these little campaigns in which corporations are doing, in which companies and studios and wherever are doing. It's more than that, and it has to last longer than that. And it can't just be, oh, this is our commercial that we have for this. It's like, what are you doing internally that's going to shift and make it so that that these things are outdated in 2032? What are you doing to structurally change your company? How much are you actually listening to employees or your employees, or are your employees just reporting things to HR and things getting swept under the rug. How often is that happening? Is it still happening? Are you thinking about it in that way? How many times are you reaching out to I had this at one of the prior companies I worked at. I won't name which one. I've had moments in which, for a show, I was asked for my opinion on, prior to some white women going to our chief marketing officer to speak on behalf of like a Black show, talking about the marketing practices for the show that was predominantly Black cast, was marketed as a Black show. They came to me prior to meeting with him to pitch their ideas to him. They met with me first and a few other Black women at the company to get our like feedback on it, but make sure it wasn't culturally insensitive, what they were pitching, to make sure things that they were saying and everything that was going to happen, that there was pretty much like, if he signed off on it, this is what's going to happen. But they came to us first just being like, we want to make sure this is not culturally insensitive. This is kind of like awkward. It was very closed door and uncomfortable. And I had to mark off so many of the ideas because they weren't culturally sensitive, or somebody else had done it first or whatever. Just like, this is old fashioned. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. And I'm like, you could have just included people into the process. We could have been included and put into the process of making these things happen. We could have, worked in tandem. We could have worked together on this. The fact that you're just trying to use me as a checks and balances before going off and doing the pitch yourself, not even including me in that room, and that room is going to be entirely white, that's insulting. That's not, you're half stepping it. You're trying to pat yourself on the back and make yourself feel better by doing the right thing, by making sure that at least at some point in the process it gets checked by Black people. But that's it. And so I'm like, I don't want to see more of that happening ever. I want to see more. I want to see like true like inclusion and not diversity, but inclusion. It's just like, it's not just Black faces. What Black faces have power? What Black faces or other different cultures, when we're talking about other shows, who has green light power? Who can vote and say yes or no to a project? Who can say this doesn't work, that doesn't work, and not have a fear of retribution, not have a fear of being fired, not having a fear of being blacklisted in Hollywood, not having a fear of any of that? Who actually has say-so and power that can structurally change things? So those are the things I'm like, I would love to see, and I'm afraid that people in these power positions will kind of like try to do some surface level things, but not let it structurally change, because structural change will then mean that they are slightly losing something, because they are losing some of their power. And it's about them also being willing to give up that power in which they did not deserve from the jump. Like, this is power that you did not inherit, like you, through nepotism and other things of that nature, you have acquired this power. That does not mean that it's rightfully yours, and it needs to be distributed well. So I'm hopeful that these conversations and the moment that we're having and the movement that's coming out of this moment, I'm hopeful that will kind of create the platform and the foundation for structural change. I just want that foundation to be sturdy and solid and not flimsy, to then be like, oh, okay, now we tried it and let's go back to what we were doing, basically.
Yeah, I think part of my concern about the future is again, that like both people spoke to, just the structural piece and just kind of going through the actions or kind of checking the box. In terms of education, something I'm afraid of is that the textbooks continue to be written by who is writing those textbooks. So I think that one fear that I have is that the idea of education, what is the objective? What is the objective for learning? What are we teaching kids to take away from their learning experience? So thinking about learning content that's meaningful, that's relevant, and that is directly related to something in the world. And just speaking for myself, I was good at school, but I didn't care about the content. I just knew that I could play the game well. And that didn't serve me. And I think that as an educator thinking about teaching kids to think, and I mentioned this before, just that practice of observation and insight and in offering people time to kind of think about how they yeah, what part of it, like in the history book, where do I fit in this history book? History book is like this book that has all this context about other people, but who am I in history in this moment is something that I would like to see. And something I am afraid of is the continuation of cancel culture. I think that there's a lot of assumptions that are made. It can be really harmful. And one way that I've seen some people, I've also had a lot of people email me over the past week. They're like, can you look at this? Like, I'll pay you to look at this and make sure that it, doesn't ruffle any feathers. And my response to them was, thank you for acknowledging that my emotional labor, and number one, my thought is of value. Also that there's emotional labor. Thank you for acknowledging that. And I am one person that has one lived experience. And so I saw an organization that posted like a redacted statement. So they had a picture of a statement, and then they kind of they redacted the name for anonymity, but then they kind of just had like, this line doesn't name what's happening, or this line, and they kind of broke it down in a way, and then offered it as education. So that I'm not going to do any more emotional work, but here's an example of an effort, and valiant effort. Huzzah, if you need a cookie, fabulous. You have started the work, enjoy. And here's the next level of the consciousness that we can take you to. So I think that the cancel culture can be very divisive, and we have enough division. So yeah.
Such important points. Jason, I saw you wanted to comment. No?
That cancel culture statement is real.
Yeah, cancel culture.
It's real. It's real, and we have to get out of that. We have to. We are giving. It's just too unfair. It's just too unfair. And I agree. 100% with that. And I find myself being guilty of it at times. I find myself holding people accountable of it, saying, no, you can't say that person is canceled because of this one misstep or this one misfire. And then I find myself like, I don't mess with this person because they did this. But they may have a countless body. They may have a healthy, heavy body of work, but I want to hold myself accountable to subscribing to cancel culture too, because it's convenient. And part of this discussion is like breaking the convenience.
Yeah, and Makita, you mentioned part of your practice is calling people into alignment of their vision of the future. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think we had talked about this a little bit last week, but just the power of words.
Yes.
And thinking about decolonizing the education that we've been breathing as air. That even just those tiny revisions, and this goes back to the stream idea of revising the way that we are working with the different systems and all the language. So much is codified. And so instead of calling people out, there's this like expulsion of like, I'm a good person and you haven't done the work, or how dare you, like, I thought you were on our team, and that othering happens. And so, yeah, just that in circles practice and restorative justice, the idea is that everyone has a voice, everyone is needed for what they bring. And sometimes someone saying that really triggering, not educated or well-grounded comment is learning for other people. And so that is the power, I think, at least in thinking about education and having students and security and everyone come back to school sites, whatever that looks like, is having people sit in the space and understanding that if we push someone out, and this is part of the challenge with disciplinary practices, the way that they are in education now, is when you push someone out, the learning for them stops, but the learning for the community stops, and the community starts believing that they're better if they don't have to deal with the discomfort, if they don't have to deal with the distraction, if they don't have to deal with the disruption. And even just thinking about a shift that I'm doing a lot of revision in my own thinking, but there's a lot of work around trauma-informed care in education. There's this movement for trauma-informed care. And again, the content in the training is thinking about teaching teachers about how to teach students, when really the teachers have been traumatized. Their ancestors have been, they're involved. We're all involved in this. And so I think that calling people into the space, maybe understanding where people are with their racial literacy, and then scaffolding that way. And so that there's boundaries. Like, I know from experience that I'm gonna get triggered when this person talks. I know. I've been in the space with this person for this long. What are the strategies that I have to maintain? And what are the strategies that the structure in terms of a space have to name it, hold it, and also offer learning? Because I think that as an educator, that's my thought, is the meaningful education means that there is dissonance. We want dissonance. We want kids to be like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Why is that? And then you can kind of walk them through. I just think adults have so much work. So much work.
Yes.
A lot of adults are still working through their own adverse childhood experiences, right? So you're still working through your own ACE, yet you have to deal with being a professional at a workspace that's not welcoming, and the pressure of empowering those seated in front of you. So it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yes. And so many of the narratives and languages is really so powerful. And Brett Banks is with us, and he just put in the chat, words have power. They sure do. And the narratives that have been told to us sometimes are repackaged, or at least my experience of the narratives that have been told about my ancestry is very much repackaged and handed to me through like a European white lens, which is extremely disempowering. And there's so much that is being included or that is being taught in history classes, not just here but around the world, that is missing a lot of knowledge and information that is really important. And I really hope that in the future our experiences of learning about our ancestry look different. And I want to, as you were sharing, I was thinking about the Confederate statues all over the US that are being pulled down, and also in the UK and in Berlin and in other cities. What are your thoughts on, on the fact that we're still, these statues still seem to be in public space. So that's obviously something that, and there's debate around it as well, which is surprising to me. What are your thoughts on that in light of like, yeah, let's unpack that.
So for undergrad, I went to Virginia State University in Petersburg, Virginia, right outside of Richmond. The main street to go from Petersburg to Richmond was Jefferson Davis Highway. I lived off of Jefferson Davis Highway. When I moved off campus, my friend and I decided we're gonna move a little bit further from campus so we could have this cool experience where we're not like a student, we're like this pseudo student who goes to school, but they're adults. Our next door neighbors on both sides, Confederate flags, the entire street, Confederate flags. The most interesting thing was how they faced forward outside of their flag with love, and they were so nice. But for me, being in Virginia as a Black male and as a student at a HBCU, watching law enforcement prey on students from our school, right? Watching people who came to school to get an education leave with a degree and potentially a record was unreal to me, right? So we used to see those statues, and I'm speaking specifically about Jefferson Davis and Richmond. this was a prominent statue. I mean, it was the focal point outside of a much smaller Arthur Ashe statue. Those are the only two statues I remember. And having to deal with that at 19, 18, and knowing how wrong it was and just how vile it was, but not having the wherewithal, the maturity to face it, like in a space of what can we do about it? They say ignorance is bliss, and that sometimes it really is. Like, I'm so thankful that I was ignorant to it then, because I may not have made it through that undergrad experience. But to answer your question, super excited they're coming down. They should have never been erected, but if they were erected, they should have came down a long time ago. I do respect history, but I understand that you don't have to have intentional memorials of history that wasn't the best representation of a big part of the population, right? But I think about what's next, because there's a lot of slave owners that still have statues. There's a lot of memorials that are still up. I mean, are we going to do away with the Washington, D.C. view? I mean, the whole thing. I mean, I look forward to see where we go with it. But I'm excited to see it happen. I'm excited to see it happen around the world. And these are images that, as a 43-year-old adult, did not think I would see. And I think about my mother, who's in her early 80s, who's fortunate enough to still be alive and see what's happening. And it's just the most badass thing that I could think of that's happening right now. Like, that's the television I want to see, like these
Yes.
statues getting decapitated and ripped off, and it's just
Yes.
amazing.
What does your mom think about what's happening? Shout out to your mom.
Yeah, shout out to my mom. I mean, she's man, she's growing. Like, I'm watching her grow, right? Like, think about things that aren't, just like her views on the LGBTQ community. I seen that change. I seen, words, to Brett Banks' point, words have power. I seen her start to realize that words that she used were powerful, but the wrong way, right? I seen, I asked her questions that I've never really asked before, because she grew up in rural Ohio for the first 18 years of her life, and then moved to a very segregated Pittsburgh in the 50s, like around the time of August Wilson's Fences, right? So we seen what was happening in that time frame. So just watching her, I mean, I still bug out, because like she can't believe that weed is legal and you could go to work with a bunch of tattoos. Like, she's loving it though. She's loving it. So she's seeing metaphorical statues torn down based on her experiences. And mom's is woke. I can say mom's is woke, and she might not have been woke, a couple years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I mean, but she's seen it all. She's seen segregation, right? She's seen the civil rights. Um, wasn't really her voice per se. She didn't find her voice in that space outside of being marginalized and understanding what that looked like, and trying to make it a protective environment for her children. But it's so wild seeing it from an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old,
Mm.
82-year-old. I have a daughter who's going into her senior year at University of Chicago, right? So our argument, they're not even debates, they're arguments. And they're heated, right? She's so smart. She gets it. What she's learning at school is crazy. Her experience is crazy. But it's just like, I see all these views, right? I see my wife, who works for a global fashion company, who is being invited to the table in a completely different capacity than before. And it's not necessarily out of sheer tokenism. More so, they do have a desire to get it right. And they realize that they had talent right underneath their nose that they weren't harnessing and cultivating. And now, you need your chief conscience officers, right? You need your CCOs. We're all CCO. So we're going to be the ones who audit it. Makita, I love what you said about you being called into that space to give your excuse me, Sharice, you being called into the space, and Makita echoed it as well. And the coolest thing, my takeaway was, in the spirit of healthy opportunism, telling them, yeah, I can help you with that. Pay me. Like we can have a whole different conversation. I can help you with that area. I can put a team together. We can add it to my job description if you like, but it's no longer just a free add-on that I'm contributing to the workplace because of the structural issues that have taken place prior to us joining the workforce, right? Now, I'm always going to help someone who wants to be helped, but from the people of influence and the power seats, got to pay me, and let's formalize it. Let's make it intent. Let's make it where I can proudly walk into this workplace as your fill in the blank officer, right? Just not your chief token officer.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, Brett is saying in the chat, your mom was able to experience both sides of spectrums of the divides, major to witness.
Brett knows my mom, so that's a fun fact.
That's awesome. Yeah, this week we were envisioning, as we're ideating some things for the 2032 story world, with AR glasses. When you look at in public spaces, like what's going to replace these very problematic statues that represent problematic history that needs to be acknowledged. And we were ideating them being replaced with Indigenous elders sharing pieces of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes.
Yes.
It's interesting to me. I have just a quick comment about this subject, but it's seeing even the statues being taken down is speaking to just how much like white people are feeling conflicted about what's happening right now and feeling confronted with whatever guilt they may feel, because I would have never thought that these statues would be taken down. And like, there's because so many people, because you can talk about the Confederate flag, whatever, but you're like, these are historical figures. Even if you don't agree with them, they're like historical figures. And but why we need to take down them? Why do we need to change street names? Like, that's not important. Like, the idea that people are understanding how embedded this is, like to be a Black person and to see those symbols of people who is advocating for your right, for the idea that your life does not matter, that your life is nothing, that your life, all it was to be a mule. Like the fact that like these are things in which you're confronted with every single day. And even to seeing the conservative flag, the Confederate flag as something that like this was a group this was a sector of the country that was like trying to just advocate straight up for slavery, wanted to keep slavery around. Like even seeing those images, like people are starting to begin to understand just how deep that is. How I think about for me growing up, so I always was a part of Model United Nations. That's part of my like childhood through high school, and now I'm a college advisor for the regional program that is for what states? New Jersey, PA, and Maryland. And my dad was a program director for this specific regional sector of Model UN, and was from 2000 till 2012. So that speaks to so much about why it was even so globally focused, because my parents were. But in alongside of that, there's also the Conference on National Affairs. So you have regional Model UN programs, you have youth and government programs in different states, and then top students from each state, from each program, are then selected to get to go to the Conference on National Affairs, in which everyone from around the country is now debating these different topics, and you're writing bills, you're writing legislation, you're doing a whole lot of things. And a lot of those people are now involved in politics and so on and so forth. But so I got to go my senior year. I was one of 25 students selected from my program to get to go, and going there, and it's at Blue Ridge Assembly in Black Mountain in North Carolina, and it's this huge, gorgeous, expansive land. And in Blue Ridge Assembly, in their main hall, is a giant painting of Robert E. Lee. huge. And it's like and there's a lot of conversation now. Blue Ridge, they decided to take it down, but people even didn't realize what that meant to a lot of the Black students going in and seeing. I've reached this pinnacle of this program that I'm involved with, and here I'm immediately confronted with this figure, with this huge um, painting. And I spoke to my dad about it a lot because he was obviously like very frequently an advisor to the Conference on National Affairs and was present. And every year he had to kind of go in there and also see that. But as one of the only Black people in leadership roles, as one of the only Black people just on staff for any of the staffs that were coming from around the country, he was often just kind of observant and quiet, and was also trying not to divert from the experience the students were having, because it ultimately was not about him. But now is finding that people are asking him like, well, Curtis, oh my God, what did you think about this? I didn't know you felt this type of way. I had no idea. I didn't know this was a thing. I didn't know this was feeling. And he's like, I felt this. You'd be surprised if you asked me my opinions as a man who's about to be 53. Like, imagine how I've been feeling all these years. Imagine what my lifespan has been like, and what I've seen, and how I felt seeing these statues and seeing these paintings and seeing these figures who did not believe in my right to life, did not believe in my idea, like me even being a full person, how I feel seeing that. So seeing people's how people are going from like those big ideas of like defunding the police and all that type of stuff, to seeing how people see everyday things like these statues that are in place in everyone's lives, and seeing the street names or anything like that, and having people go, this is uncomfortable. Or even, I don't know if you guys have seen, but or know this group, but Lady Antebellum, which is a country group,
Yeah.
which is one of the few that I actually like, and Two Men, Two Women, and they changed their name to Lady A recently,
Cool.
because of the term antebellum,
Mm.
and them coming to terms with what antebellum means, because they are all white and they're like, oh, antebellum, thinking about like, the South, it's such a part of the Southern culture and we are all from the South. And then coming kind of confronting the history behind that word, and them just saying, you know what, we've been a group for years, we've won a whole bunch of Grammys, we're wonderful, we're going to change our name to Lady A.
And Sharissa, I want to just mention one thing that you brought up that is important, and that is like value and the value of human life. And the elephant in the room outside the culturally embedded norms that are so important, especially when it comes to children, and what kind of imagery and where we see ourselves and where our children are seeing it themselves, but specifically to the value of human life. The fact that the murders and the brutality that is happening, and where justice is not served till this moment. Breonna Taylor's murders are still have not been jailed. So like that is for me a big elephant in the room that I think you really brought up in the conversation. And we got a question, thank you, Sonia, where I want to kind of also ask our panelists to, in addressing this question, also close us out with your call to actions. But Sonia's question specifically is on the topic of business cultures, and she would love to hear your thoughts on what attributes you envision for equitable workplaces. And she's one of these people that has been invited to the table and is thinking about the ways to create meaningful change. So I'd love for you to address this question and also your calls to action.
So I guess I'll address it and segue it into call to actions. Sonia, one of the things that's important is realizing where would you be if you did not work there, right? Like that's a big thing to take stock on. Are you okay with not working there, right? Because what I'm gonna encourage you to do is be very bold, right? These are one of my calls to actions. My calls to actions they're really interfacing today, and they're really intrinsic. And I think the be bold is, Sonia, walking into that table, right? First and foremost, realizing you should have been invited to that table. 2, you have so much to contribute, and now's the time to unapologetically, right, contribute and not worry about what's next or the backlash, or you have something to contribute. I say go for it, be unapologetic, but I also think you should have um, plans and solutions to some of the things that you bring up, because just period, everyone loves to hear, well, not really, but I do. I love to hear a solution like that's plan oriented, so we can kind of break it down and have marching orders. But line up what you want to get accomplished in that meeting. And I read, I don't know if anyone follows Cindy Suarez on here, but Cindy Suarez is like really dope. And she does a lot of work regarding power and how to define your power and lean into your power, and how to put together power roadmaps to designate where the power is in the room, in the relationship, and how you maneuver through it. I mean, she's phenomenal. Read the power roadmap, right? See where the power lies. See what the power roadmap is, and see where your power lies. See where you sit within that space. You may have more power than you think, right? But don't be discouraged if you have less power than you think. But it's really just write this down. I'm just teasing. Be bolder than ever, right? Be influential unapologetically. Always look to influence. Every situation, every circumstance you're in. I used to do fundraising. And in fundraising, one of the things I had to realize was your light could never be off, right? You always had to be on, because there was always a potential resource for you to bring back to those who you represented, right? So for me as a fundraiser, personality wise, I like to kind of drift off and do my own thing and be in my own space and interact as I deem comfortable. But once I started to do fundraising, it changed that in me, and I had to be more outgoing, outspoken, and more fluid, right? But more so on, because I never knew what opportunity was going to be a chance to bring back resources for the students that I represented, right? So in this space, as far as like approaching the table and using your influence, just be on, right? And another call to action is anyone, and I wish I would have got to say this a little bit earlier, but anybody who joined this conversation today or panel today because they're in my personal network, I challenge you to continue coming to Resilience and continue to hear what's happening here, and continue to join platforms that may not be either your comfort or just your default go-to tribe. Come, right? I mean, I came last week for the first time, and I thought about it for an entire week. So when Noor said, "Do you want to get down this week?" I'm like, yes, of course, right? And each one teach one, right? Continue to do it. So start with you, your circle of influence, be bold, be unapologetic, be influential. And let's also remind Joe Biden that he's just a placeholder in history. If he does it right, if he's intentional in how he moves forward, he will understand he is a placeholder in history, and his sole role is to create a team around him that is being prepared for the next go round. That's it.
That part, yes.
I hope you saw the applause all around. Thank you so much, Jason. That means a lot.
Thank you.
Oh, God.
Cherise?
Yeah, to piggyback on that, this kind of answers both questions, or call to action plus like equitable workplace practices. And one of my favorite thought leaders and authors and researchers, everything, is Brene Brown. Educators and all that. She's incredible. And I was listening to her podcast this morning that is very new, like a few months old. And she was sharing that one of the things that like she constantly like reminds herself or tells herself in her brain, her like mantra to herself when she is being confronted with missteps that she might have made or whatever it is on any given topic, she tells herself, my focus is to get it right, not in being right. My focus is to get it right, not to be right. And I think that's an important distinction, because if more people really took that into place and thinking that like, you're going to get it wrong, you're going to be incorrect, you're going to have practices that were based in things that aren't ethical, even if like because of the space in which you're in, and you know, you might be raised in racism, you just have no, like, there's, everyone is off on their values usually because of the society in which we're raised in. And so what do you then do about it when you're confronted with it? How do you then change and understand that like it's not just about you going, I'm right, I'm gonna like no, like, and being confronted with that shame of someone telling you that, this makes me uncomfortable. Are you going to hammer back with, well, I don't know why, like I'm a good person, I'm nice, I'm da 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 da, like I have Black friends, I have this, I have that? Are you gonna go and say, well, we have these great corporate policies and we have diversity and we do this and we do that? Or are you going to listen? Our company is going to listen and say, okay, hold on. What? Okay, so what do we need to shift? All right, we've had the insane, entirely white executive team for 60 years, just interchanging faces, but all white, generally men. Okay, like didn't realize that was going to be that big of a problem. Like even seeing that way, even understanding that even if you add in like a diversity and inclusion team, if that team only has like managerial power, but not like C-suite power, that's a thing. That's a problem. So being okay with being wrong, and learning that that is part of life and that is part of the learning process, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and that's fine. Be comfortable being uncomfortable, and take those steps to constantly engage and learn how to be right and having the dialogue, but not be so tied up on I need to be right and I'm always going to be right, I'm always going to be correct, because you're not. And coming into that is a sense of like pride and a fear of being shamed or fear of being of not knowing. I think a lot of, especially in academic spaces, I see that a lot of people being like afraid of not knowing or for looking dumb or stupid. And it's just like, you had to learn somehow. Everyone has to learn somewhere and somehow. So either come into that with, openness, or be really closed off and have a chip on your shoulder and get nothing, get no progress internally and then externally. So we see that on an individual level, we see that on a corporate level, we see it like on a larger societal level. And it's just like, needs to be more of a focus on getting it right, not being right. Is all I would say to that.
Thank you, Sheree. Akira?
Just to keep building off that, Sharice, that I have, I think, I'll share the link. I think it's drworks.org, but they have a document about white supremacist culture and they have characteristics of it. And what I've started doing is putting those on sticky notes around my house. And so that as I'm going through, because my house is my office now, but my partner and I, when things are coming up or we're getting emails, like we just go and we stand and we look at some of those characteristics. Some of those characteristics include a binary, which is a whole nother conversation, but that yes and no, or the right and wrong, that is a mindset that supports, well, if I'm a good white person, or if I'm a good ally, or if then I can't be wrong about that. So I think that question of for what are you gaining? Like, what do you gain from being correct in this moment? What can be gained if you learn something? I think that's always like, what do you lose? What do you lose? There's face, you might lose face, you might lose a sense of identity. If you're giving, you might lose wealth. We mentioned I think it was the founder of Reddit stepped down. So you might lose wealth. worst case scenario is that you probably still have some pensions and you probably still have some resources and you probably still have some networking. So really, what are we willing to give up? What are we willing to compromise to make these shifts that are necessary in order for us to have a sustainable world? And specifically to Sonia's comment about what to do in terms of business culture, and forward thinking, futuristic thinking of those CCOs being a part of regular organizational maps. I would love to see how they have what is it, offsites for corporate, and they go and they do what's our team going to be, or they have these practices to kind of get people into understanding what the culture of an organization is.
I think they call them retreats.
Thank you. Yes, the retreats. I would love to see retreats framed through a lens of group relations. So thinking about what are the boundaries of the organization, what's the authority within the organization, what are the roles that are played, and what's the task. And so the acronym for that is BART. But having them think about boundaries, authority, roles, and tasks throughout the organization with an equity lens. And I was just thinking about, even with Zoom, right? The person who's speaking has that green box around. Like in a Zoom meeting, where is the green box? Who's being seen, who's being heard? And I'm sure that there's an app that has not yet been created that can offer you at the end of a Zoom or end of a call, or even at the end of a space, hey, you talked 75% of the time. And so to create de-identifiable data that allows people to see who's taking space. And again, without that shame, okay, now that we see that, now what are we going to do? Because it's based in our group relations, our charter for our organization. So it becomes less about top down, but it's who's present in the space, whose voice is being heard, and how is the CCO, how are we bringing that into the space? So that's what I would like to see on a business level. And yeah, who has the green box?
Yeah, someone else, I think this was in one of our writers' room sessions. I don't remember who was pointing this out, but there is a tendency for white males to wind up on the front page of a Zoom meeting because culturally they're encouraged to speak more than listen.
It was in our
Ooh.
It was in our discussion.
Like,
I think Bob just joined the Zoom.
It was our discussion around our AI bot that we're building, because we were speculating on inclusion in that process. And so it came up around Microsoft Teams. Typically, it only highlights the people who talk the most. And often you'll notice that the whole meeting will be just made up of mostly white men. Yeah.
And so valuing the intentional, how are we passing the mic? How are we creating space for everyone to speak? Awesome.
Thank you, Michelle, for that. Michelle and Mina are together, yay, in Austin, and they're also Team Resilience, and working on a bot, which is really exciting for the story world. Thank you so much for this really powerful conversation. There's a lot of resources that were shared in the chat, and Makita, if you could also share some of the resources that you mentioned, the Post-its one, I tried to look it up, the drworks.org, I believe.
Marley just added it to the chat. I believe this is the right one, dismantlingracism.org.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jason, any final words? Because I know, there's a lot that was mentioned and I saw you reacting as well. So I want to give you the last word.
I'm just excited. I'm just giddy over here. Like, this was such a great opportunity to spend a Saturday afternoon. You know, we always talk about, a lot of friends and I, we always discuss either you're building or you're destroying. So it felt really good to just build with you all today. And, you know, I just hope you all continue to offer a space for more people to join your tribe, because this is definitely a tribe I would like to continue to learn from and contribute to, and just power to the people.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jason. You are part of the tribe, and we're honored to
The
have
light.
you. Yes, we're honored you joined us, and we can't wait for the. This is just the beginning. Um, we are building the future now together, and thank you for introducing CCOs to us now. We say it, we've established it's a thing by the end of this conversation. So we're making it happen. And hopefully all the other people that will listen to this later on YouTube will also make it happen and take these ideas forward. Thank you, Jason. Um, this is the part where we prototype some characters and scenarios and build artifacts of the future for 15 minutes in breakout rooms. And
Yeah, before we stop the live stream and break out, I just want to I just included go up in the chat for all of our speakers links. I added them all as they were giving their call to action. And then I just added to the chat all of our social links. We would love it if you would go on social and share either one takeaway from this conversation or multiple takeaways from this conversation or your response to the prompt. We will reshare them on whatever platform you have. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And then if you want to share this YouTube video to this conversation specifically, there's also the link for the live stream right there. Yeah, thank you so much to our guests, and thank you to everyone who is here and for what you're about to share creatively in our breakout rooms.
yes.
We hope you, also we have on Tuesdays our Resilience Writers Room, and we will be unpacking the things that were talked about today and formulating visions for the future and stories for the future in a deeper way on Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time.
Cool. Actually, we do have one more announcement that I'll take 30 seconds to share, that we are officially fiscally sponsored by SEMA, which is a nonprofit that, produces social impact documentaries, films, and other productions, which means that we are officially, if you make a donation to Resilience, it's a tax deductible donation. So yes, if you believe in the work we're doing, also support our work and our writers' room and our story world that will go live very soon. And yeah, this is we're also in the last week of the Can XR Accelerator and Incubator. And so we're going to be pitching very soon. And we'll be sure to report out some updates and maybe show the demo video as well. Not next week, but the week after. And we'll be until Juneteenth. We will be focusing on the future of justice. So yes, please continue to join us and continue to share our work. And Brett, I know you're with us, and I really hope that you'll also join us as a panelist. We're a big fan of your work and your vision for the future, not just of fashion, but of social justice as well. So